The silent observer, the cosmic assembly's grand citadel, floated in the neutral zone between three ancient galaxies, a testament to cooperation among species that had achieved faster-than-light travel millennia ago. Inside the main chamber, representatives from 900 civilizations gathered to discuss matters of galactic importance. Today's topic was the same one that had been dismissed for the past decade: Earth's petition for membership. Commander Alexei Volkov stood in the designated area for non-member species, his weathered face betraying none of the frustration that had built up over years of rejection. At 63, he had spent the last 15 years of his life trying to convince the assembly that humanity deserved a seat at the table. His dark uniform bore no decorations except for a single pin, a blue marble representing Earth. The assembly's speaker, a being called Thane Prime from the Ethereal Collective, manifested as a shifting cloud of luminescent gas. Its voice resonated through quantum harmonics that translated into every known language simultaneously. The human petition is once again before us. As we have discussed previously, Earth fails to meet our minimum requirements for consideration. Alexei had memorized the requirements by heart. A species needed to have colonized at least 50 star systems, maintained interstellar peace for a minimum of 500 years, and demonstrated what the assembly called evolved consciousness. Essentially, the ability to think beyond individual or planetary concerns. Humanity had colonized 12 systems, had only been in space for 200 years, and apparently still thought too much about their home planet. Representative Cora of the Zenthran Empire rose from her crystalline platform. Her species resembled living gemstones, their bodies refracting light in patterns that conveyed emotion. Currently, she glowed with condescension. The humans still wage conflicts among themselves on their colonies. They compete for resources instead of sharing freely. They maintain separate governments instead of unified consciousness. How can we trust such a fragmented species with galactic responsibilities? The Makani Syndicate's spokesperson, Unit 7739, projected holographic data into the center of the chamber. Statistical analysis confirms humanity operates at only 32% efficiency compared to assembly standards. Their emotional volatility creates unpredictable outcomes in 68% of scenarios. Risk assessment indicates inclusion would destabilize established protocols. Alexei listened to the familiar criticisms without interruption. They weren't entirely wrong. Humans did argue among themselves. They did compete. They did feel emotions deeply and sometimes acted on them impulsively. But the assembly saw these traits as weaknesses rather than the strengths that had allowed humanity to survive and thrive against impossible odds. When the discussion finally ended, the vote was called. 900 species voted. 897 voted against humanity's membership. 3 abstained. 0 voted in favor. Thane Prime's gaseous form shifted into what might have been sympathy. Commander Volkov, your species shows potential, but you must evolve beyond your primitive tendencies. Return when humanity has learned to transcend individual desires and emotional responses, perhaps in another millennium. Alexei bowed formally, his voice steady and diplomatic. The assembly's wisdom is noted. Humanity will continue to grow and learn. We hope to one day earn your trust and respect. As he left the chamber, Alexei noticed something odd. Several representatives were receiving urgent communications. The Zenthran delegate's crystalline form flickered with alarm, a color pattern he had never seen before. The Makani unit's processors were running calculations at maximum capacity. Something was happening. 3 days later, Alexei was still aboard the human observation post near the assembly citadel when the news broke. A species unknown to the galactic community had emerged from the void between galaxies. They called themselves nothing, they simply consumed. The assembly labeled them void reapers, beings of pure hunger that devoured energy, matter, and even the quantum foundations of reality itself. The first 3 star systems fell within hours. The assembly's response was predictable. They formed committees, analyzed data, and debated proper protocols. While they discussed, 5 more systems went dark. The Void Reapers moved unlike any threat the galaxy had faced. They didn't conquer or enslave. They simply erased everything in their path. The assembly called an emergency session. Alexei watched from Earth's observation post as the greatest military forces in the galaxy mobilized. The Zenthran Empire sent their crystal dreadnoughts, ships that could harness the power of stars. The Makani Syndicate deployed their logic-driven battle computers, capable of calculating millions of tactical scenarios per second. The ethereal collective summoned their phase warriors, beings that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The combined fleet met the Void Reapers at the terminus line, a defensive position chosen for its strategic advantage. The battle lasted exactly 43 minutes. When it ended, half the Assembly's fleet was gone. Not destroyed, but literally erased from existence. The Void Reapers had somehow adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and turned the galaxy's greatest strength, its predictable, logical approach to warfare, against itself. Panic spread through the Assembly. Species that had ruled for eons suddenly faced extinction. Refugee ships flooded the inner systems with survivors telling impossible stories of entire worlds being unraveled at the quantum level. The Assembly met in continuous session, but their debates produced no solutions. Every strategy they developed was based on thousands of years of precedent, and the Void Reapers had no precedent. It was during the darkest moment, when 17 more systems had fallen and the Assembly was considering a full retreat to another galaxy, that an unexpected message arrived. Every screen in the Assembly chamber suddenly displayed the image of Earth's current military commander, Admiral Maria Santos. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from all 12 human colonies, and behind them, something that made even the emotionless Makani pause, the entire human fleet, ships of designs the galaxy had never seen. Members of the Cosmic Assembly, Maria began, her voice carrying an edge of steel. We have been monitoring the situation. While you debated our membership, we prepared. While you dismissed our emotions as weakness, we turned them into weapons. While you called us primitive, we developed solutions your logic cannot comprehend. Thane Prime manifested in an agitated pattern. Admiral Santos, this is highly irregular. Non-member species are not permitted to address the Assembly during crisis proceedings. Maria's smile was sharp. With respect, Speaker, your procedures are failing. Your logic is failing. Your ancient wisdom is failing. The Void Reapers have consumed 22 systems while you've been having meetings about having meetings. The chamber erupted in outrage, but Maria continued. You want to know humanity's secret? We don't think in terms of acceptable losses or logical outcomes. Every human ship in our fleet carries someone's family. Every soldier fights not for abstract concepts, but for the specific people they love. When you fight for statistics, you can sacrifice pieces. When you fight for love, you sacrifice yourself before losing a single piece. Representative Cora's crystalline form blazed with indignation. You dare lecture us? Your species can barely maintain 12 systems. What could you possibly offer against an enemy that destroyed our combined fleets? The one thing the Void Reapers won't expect, Maria replied. Chaos. Beautiful, unpredictable human chaos. The Reapers adapt to patterns, to logic, to predictable responses, but they've never faced a species that treats warfare like jazz. Improvisation built on a foundation of controlled insanity. The Assembly members looked at each other in confusion. Jazz-controlled insanity? These were not military terms they understood. Maria's expression grew serious. Give us operational command at the next defensive line. Not your ships, we know you won't trust us with those. Just let us show you how humans fight when everything we love is threatened. If we fail, you lose nothing you weren't already going to lose. If we succeed, she left the sentence hanging. The implications were clear. If humanity saved the galaxy that had rejected them, everything would change. The debate that followed was fierce but brief. The Void Reapers were only 7 systems away from the Assembly Citadel itself. Desperation won over pride. The vote was called. 412 species voted to give humanity command. 488 voted against, but it was enough. For the first time in galactic history, a non-member species would lead Assembly forces. As the connection ended, Alexei stood in the observation post, watching the human fleet move toward the new defensive line. They weren't the largest ships or the most advanced, but there was something about the way they moved, unpredictable, almost alive with purpose. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had known all along. Sometimes the greatest strength came not from transcending emotions, but from embracing them completely. The Unleashed Storm. The Meridian Line represented the last major defensive position before the Cosmic Assembly's core systems. 300,000 ships from various assembly species formed perfect geometric formations. their positions calculated to maximize firepower efficiency. In stark contrast, the human fleet of just 8,000 vessels moved in seemingly random patterns, like a school of fish avoiding an invisible predator. Admiral Maria Santos stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship, the ESV Persistence, watching the tactical display with her senior staff. Unlike the sterile, silent bridges of assembly vessels, the human command center buzzed with controlled chaos. Officers called out readings, debated tactics, and even argued about approaches. To any assembly observer, it would look like disorder. To Maria, it was humanity at its finest. "Contact in T-4 hours, reported Captain James Chen from the tactical station. "The Void Reapers are maintaining their standard consumption pattern. They'll hit the Zenthran battle line first." Maria shook her head. "No, they won't." She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to all assembly forces." When the connection established, hundreds of alien faces appeared on screens throughout the bridge. Many looked skeptical, others openly hostile. They had agreed to human command out of desperation, not trust. "Assembly fleet, this is Admiral Santos. In exactly 17 minutes, you will break formation and retreat to these coordinates." She transmitted a set of positions that seemed to make no tactical sense. Scattering the fleet across 3 systems instead of concentrating firepower. Unit 7739 of the Makani Syndicate immediately protested. "Admiral, this dispersal reduces combat efficiency by 73%. Logic dictates concentrated firepower provides optimal defense." "Logic is exactly what's killing you," Maria replied bluntly. "The Void Reapers have been fighting logical opponents since they arrived. They expect optimal positioning, maximum efficiency, predictable responses, so we're going to give them the opposite." Representative Cora's ship, the Crystal Fortress, maintained position. "We will not abandon the line based on human intuition. The Zenthran Empire has held defensive positions for 3,000 years. Maria's eyes hardened. "And how did that work out at the terminus line? Half your fleet was erased in 43 minutes. She paused, then spoke with deliberate intensity. "I'm not asking you to trust human intuition. I'm asking you to trust human fear. We're terrified of the Void Reapers. And that terror has made us think of every possible way they might attack. Fear makes you creative when logic fails." Something in her words must have resonated. Slowly, reluctantly, the assembly fleet began to move. Not all of them. About a third maintained their positions, including Cora's Crystal Fortress. But the majority followed the seemingly senseless human deployment. What happened next changed galactic military doctrine forever. The Void Reapers arrived exactly on schedule, their biomechanical ships rippling with dark energy that seemed to eat light itself. They approached the Meridian line in their standard formation, ready to adapt to whatever weapons the defenders used. But instead of finding a concentrated fleet, they encountered something unprecedented: empty space with scattered sensor ghosts. The human fleet had deployed millions of tiny drones, each broadcasting false ship signatures. To the Void Reaper's sensors, it appeared as if the entire defensive fleet was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. The consuming entities paused, their adaptive algorithms struggling to process contradictory data. That moment of confusion was all humanity needed. "Execute Chaos Protocol," Maria commanded. What followed could barely be called a battle. It was more like a deadly dance where humans led and the universe followed. Human ships emerged from hyperspace not in formation, but in deliberately random positions. They fired weapons that made no tactical sense. Electromagnetic pulses followed by kinetic rounds followed by exotic matter bursts. No pattern, no logic, just pure controlled chaos. The Void Reapers' greatest strength was their ability to adapt. But adaptation required patterns to recognize. The humans gave them none. One ship would attack with plasma weapons, then the next would use gravity distortions. Then another would simply ram the enemy at full speed while broadcasting ancient Earth music at maximum volume. Captain Lisa Park of the ESV Defiance executed a maneuver that would become legendary. She flew her ship directly into a Void Reaper consumption field, something that should have erased her vessel instantly. But at the last second, she ejected her ship's entire antimatter core while simultaneously jumping to hyperspace. The resulting explosion didn't just damage the Void Reaper. It created a cascade reaction that destabilized their entire quantum absorption matrix. The assembly forces that had followed human orders found themselves in perfect position to exploit the chaos. As the Void Reapers struggled to adapt to human unpredictability, conventional weapons suddenly became effective again. The enemy's adaptation algorithms, overwhelmed by too much contradictory data, began to fail. But the real genius of the human strategy revealed itself when the Void Reapers tried to retreat. Humanity had anticipated this, scattered their forces not randomly but in a pattern that only made sense if the enemy tried to escape. Every retreat route led into another trap, another paradox, another impossibility that the Void Reapers couldn't process. The battle turned into a rout, but not the kind the galaxy expected. The Void Reapers, faced with an enemy that defied comprehension, began to consume themselves in confusion. Their perfect adaptation mechanisms turned against contradictory inputs, created feedback loops that tore their ships apart from within. In 6 hours, humanity had accomplished what the combined assembly fleets couldn't do in weeks. They had not just stopped the Void Reapers, but had turned their own nature against them. The 1/3 of the assembly fleet that had refused human orders, including Korra's Crystal Fortress, hadn't fired a single shot. They had maintained perfect formation and watched in stunned silence as chaos defeated order, as emotion triumphed over logic, as humanity's supposed weaknesses became the galaxy's salvation. When the last Void Reaper ship imploded in a cascade of contradictions, the battlefield fell silent. Then, from the ESV Persistence, Admiral Santos broadcast a single message to the assembly fleet. "This is how humans fight when we have something to lose. Imagine how we fight when we have something to gain." The aftermath was immediate and profound. The assembly reconvened within hours, not days. The same chamber that had rejected humanity now buzzed with urgent discussions. The vote this time was different: unanimous approval for immediate human membership, with full voting rights and a permanent seat on the Security Council. But when Thane Prime formally extended the invitation, Admiral Santos surprised everyone with her response. "We accept membership," she said, appearing on the chamber's screen still in her battle-worn uniform. "But on one condition. The Assembly must acknowledge that diversity of thought, including emotional decision-making and controlled chaos, are not weaknesses to be transcended, but strengths to be embraced." The chamber fell silent. No species had ever placed conditions on membership. It was considered the highest honor the galaxy could bestow. Maria continued, "The Void Reapers defeated you because you had become too predictable in your perfection. You need species like humanity, emotional, chaotic, unpredictable, not in spite of these qualities, but because of them. We don't want to join an assembly that will try to fix us. We want to join one that will value what makes us different." The debate that followed was unlike any in assembly history. For the first time in millennia, members questioned their fundamental assumptions about consciousness, evolution, and strength. The Mechani Syndicate ran new calculations that showed diversity of problem-solving approaches increased survival probability by magnitudes. The Zenthran Empire admitted their crystalline perfection had made them brittle. Even the Ethereal Collective acknowledged that transcending emotion might have cost them something valuable. The final vote was unanimous again, but this time it approved not just humanity's membership, but a fundamental restructuring of the assembly itself. New species would be evaluated not on how closely they matched existing members, but on what unique perspectives they could bring. Commander Alexei Volkov, who had spent 15 years being told humanity wasn't ready, was asked to help write the new inclusion protocols. His first act was to eliminate the requirement for evolved consciousness and replace it with diverse consciousness. As Earth's ships returned home, they carried news that would reshape human society. They had not just earned a place among the stars. They had shown the galaxy that humanity's perceived flaws were actually its greatest gifts. The species that had been called too emotional, too chaotic, too primitive had saved civilization precisely because they were all those things. The Cosmic Assembly had learned a profound lesson. Sometimes the most evolved response isn't to transcend your nature, but to embrace it fully. And sometimes the youngest voice in the room has the most important thing to say. In the years that followed, humanity's approach to problem-solving spread throughout the galaxy. Chaos Protocol became standard training. Emotional intelligence became a required course at military academies. And thinking like a human became the highest compliment one could give to a creative solution. The galaxy had asked humanity to evolve beyond emotion and chaos. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy to evolve beyond the fear of them.